So today's agenda is unemployment. Um, if I had to bet on कौन सा chapter आना है in the essays or case study, I think I would bet like 60% on unemployment का chapter. It's sort of like a new chapter that they've added on. It was there before, but now that it has come back. Um it sort of covers the missing element जो ADAS के अंदर था. In fact, not only this one, but economic growth also. You know how when we were making those ADAS diagrams, so when you make those ADAS diagrams, obviously, उसके अंदर on the y-axis, you look at the price levels, which is inflation, and inflation का chapter was always there. And and then on the x-axis, you look at the real output, the growth, right? Economic growth, along with what has happened to the employment level. And now we're not talking about the whole the concept of it, of unemployment and economic growth. तो फिर वो problem है. Economic growth we've dealt with in the last few classes. I think we've dealt with pretty much everything that is there in it. Economic growth के अंदर the costs and benefits would be an important part. And then क्या GDP is a good measure of living standards, something along those lines. Um, A2 में तो बहुत आता था ये, but since they've shifted it to AS, I wouldn't be surprised if they would give something about this. Anyhow, today's agenda, unemployment. All right. A few things. Obviously, whenever you're talking about unemployment, you've got to first define what unemployment means. And what do we say? Well, who is unemployed, or when do we say there is unemployment? So we say, well, it's sort of like a state of when an individual or people are willing to work, but they can't find themselves work, right? So you're unemployed. But the main thing is that you should be actively looking for work. अब इसके अंदर कुछ certain terminologies है जो इन्होंने इस बार थोड़ी सी mention की in certain books. Um, we call economically economically active and economically inactive, right? Then there are terms like labor force, right? And then obviously there is a unemployment, there's a formula how to measure it, right? So whenever you're going to define the term unemployment with the willingness and ability and all, you have to, I would suggest that you should give the formula also, that is number of people unemployed divided by the labor force, and then you multiply that with 100. Now, what is a labor force? So conceptually, you should have an idea. This is how I did it with you guys earlier. Okay, if you have a population with like an age of 0 to 80 plus, and we said depending on whatever the country's legal working age is, up until what the retirement age is, so we said all the way from here to here, from 60 to 65, that is your working age population. But is everybody from this age group working? So we said not really. There is an economically active population, and then there is economically inactive population. Inactive के अंदर basically they are taking people who might be in school as full time. So they're choosing not to work from the age of 16 to 65. They've used the word homemakers. It could be house husband, housewife. It could be convicts. It can be differently abled people who are choosing not to work. So those would be the people who are considered inactive because they're part of the working age population, but choosing not to work. And then the leftover is basically the active, economically active people. Now, these people either are employed or are looking for work, right? जो unemployed होते हैं. So technically, labor force is your economically active population. That's one way of looking at it. Second way is simply you say it's the number of people unemployed plus the number of people employed, right? Those who are looking for work and can't find it, and those who found the work. So ये तुम्हारी certain terminologies हैं which you should know. उसके बाद we talk about labor force participation, right? Labor force participation. Again, ये ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा MCQs में आ सकता है. अगर ऐसे, if they want to make an essay is going to be something to do with if there's a increasing participation in the country or what could cause an increase in the participation. So it's sort of there. Okay. Formula kya batata hai? What's the understanding of the formula? I'll tell you the formula, but before let's discuss it like this. You know how from your working age population, there were people who were choosing to be inactive for whatever reason, pretty legit reasons they might have. Extra years in school might make them more productive. Taking care of the household might be more of an important job. This तरह से you can have various reasons for that, right? So basically, force participation is okay, out of this working age population, how many people are choosing to be active, right? So what's the percentage of people active out of the working age population? So in other words, it is basically the number of people who are becoming part of the labor force out of the working age population. So the formula goes labor force or the active, economically active people divided by the working age population into 100, and that would give you a percentage of people uh, choosing to work. Okay. So there could be various reasons as to why there might be an increase in these inactive people to become active. You know, it could be something as simple as it's much more easier to participate in the labor force now. It could be from the gender community, it could be from the maybe disabled, it could be even from the convicts, like most of the time they're in jail, but maybe there might be a possibility that they might be able to contribute to the social circle. And maybe, those people selected who they know that, might not be dangerous to the community. So they might take them out in a bus and take them to a certain factory, and in that factory they might get them to work and offer them a basic salary which they might get once they're out. So it's Tanasi, you can actually increase the participation rate also if you have certain programs like those, right? uh See, कुछ तरीके हैं. Generally, we do talk about like women being able to participate because it's a lot more newer concept in terms of human evolution, 50, 60, 70 years. From a corporate side, obviously, they've always been working in the primary agriculture side and working quite hard. Okay, जी, moving on. उसके बाद, we want to talk about the um, something to do with level of unemployment, right? I want to mention two things here. एक कॉन्सेप्ट है फुल एम्प्लॉयमेंट का. ओके, फुल एम्प्लॉयमेंट. So normally, this is one of those concepts जो हम ADAS पढ़ा रहे थे, and we said, how LRAS goes like this and then it becomes perfectly elastic. This is to do with ADAS, LRAS when we were studying that. And reaching this maximum point, and we said this is the full employment level, right? The बिल्कुल ही you had the vertical. side to it. So, what is this full employment level, right? So, from the labor's point of view, if we look at the labor's point of view, what we're looking at is, कि जी, it's the level of employment where, say, 95% of the labor force is working. But why not 100, I might ask, right? Why not 100? Because full employment, full actually would mean that everybody is working. All 100% of the people are working. But that's not how it goes. The thing is, there's a problem here. 100% would mean that if there is an increase in the demand for labor, there is nobody available. Everybody is working. Now, how is that new business supposed to get labor for their business? So naturally, in such a situation where 100% of the people are working, it's impossible for a new business to get labor. The only possibility is that they might have to offer the people who are already working higher wages to come and work for them. Now, that's going to be all inflationary. That's a problem for the economy, right? तो हम कहते हैं कि जी एटलीस्ट इतनी परसेंट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट होनी चाहिए that if a new business wants labor, there's enough labor, there's enough X number of labor available in the society. Maybe let's say 5%. For some, it might be 4. For some, it might be 6. But the point is that there should be enough unemployment existing in the economy that if demand increases for them, it can be fulfilled without creating inflation. It's actually called, we say, NAIRU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. But I think that is more of an A2 concept. But at least from a full employment point of view, just remember that there is always an X percentage of unemployment. And that unemployment always exists. It's not that you can eliminate it. You might be able to reduce it, but it can't be eliminated. Okay. And that's what we're going to discuss today also. Okay, Chi. For essay purposes, you should be able to have an argument of कि जी कितनी unemployment अच्छी है और कितनी unemployment अच्छी नहीं. They might ask you, but in fact, I'll go over one of the essays in which they say कि 3% unemployment ज़्यादा बुरी है कि 8% ज़्यादा बुरी, right? Now, and it's a discussed question for a 12 marker. You can't just simply say that 8% is bad overall, right? And 3% is, a good, decent unemployment because maybe it might not create inflation, but you got to argue. All right. And we'll see to that in just a bit. Recession. रिसेशन का टाइम पीरियड हमको बहुत अच्छे से समझ आनी चाहिए. रिसेशन क्या होता है? Recession is when the economic growth is continuously falling, right? Economic activity is going down. So normally what's happening is there are two ways of looking at it, and I would like you to keep an open mind on both sides. In some places, they would say a recession is when you have a negative economic growth. Now, that actually means that GDP is going to fall, okay? Like your country is going to grow negative 2%. That means last year ki production ke hisab se this year there's a 2% reduction. One way is that's what recession is. Another way of looking at it is that you may have 3 quarters of a year, that's 9 months, of falling growth rate. So that's sort of like 5% to 3% to 2%. 3 quarters consecutively, you have a falling economic growth rate. What's happening to GDP? Well, GDP is rising, but at a slower rate. So you see, there's a big difference between what we've just talked about in one, and there's a big difference what I'm saying in two. The both can be constituted as a recession. In some places, you might even see not 3 quarters, 2 quarters, consecutive 2 quarters of falling economic growth, not going into negative, but just falling constitutes a recession. But one thing is for sure, aggregate demand is going to fall down. All right. Economic activity is going to go down. Employment is going to go down. Right. So, from that point of view, recession के अंदर what is going to happen to employment, you would want to discuss that. Okay, moving on. Why main reasons why people may enter or leave unemployment. So, a few reasons, few general reasons, जो MCQs में can be used. Why people enter unemployment? They may leave school or they just left school or university and they're looking for work, can't find it. They've lost the job, made redundant, voluntary left job, or maybe pursuing their passion or going for holiday or, figuring out what life is all about, stuff like that. Stop being a homemaker, meaning, they're now looking for work. KG, house is taken care of. You have enough people to, take care of the household. Or you might want to pursue your passion of textile designing or maybe, you know, some artwork or something. And now you want to sell all of that stuff and you want to get employed, curate or stuff like that. Uh, I'll do the proper way of this. How to measure unemployment? वो तो हो गया. What types of unemployment you have? ऐसे आ सकता है for an 8 marker. The question is going to be something like, what are the types of unemployment? And consider which one's the most serious. Okay. So you want to talk about the three major types of unemployment. पहला फ्रिक्शनल हो जाता है, दूसरा स्ट्रक्चरल हो जाता है, and the last one is cyclical. We want to break it down even more. Okay, there are subcategories to it. Frictional के अंदर we're talking about it's more of a temporary situation, right? It's more of a temporary. So इसके अंदर आपके पास आ सकता है search unemployment. You left one job, you're looking for another one which pays you better or it has better working conditions or better fringe benefits and things like that. So you're looking for it. You may have certain casual unemployment. You may have seasonal unemployment. Okay. These ones are usually short term, right? अब जहां तक बात होती है, consider which one's the serious and not serious. That has to do with two things. One, whether it's a short term or a long term one, and whether it affects a lot of people or a fewer people relatively. Okay. So technically, these ones are a lot lesser in numbers and it's short term. Okay. इसमें एक चीज होती है जिसको हम बोलते हैं वॉलंटरी अनएम्प्लॉयड. मतलब इस सैलरी पे तो मैं नहीं काम करता, मुझे थोड़े बेहतर पैसे चाहिए. तो दैट्स व्हाट वॉलंटरी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट वुड मीन. दैट जो करंट मार्केट वेज रेट है उसके ऊपर आप काम करने को नहीं तैयार है. ओके, अदर्स माइट बी विलिंग एंड एबल टू टेक. ओके. फिर उसके बाद जब हम स्ट्रक्चरल में जाते हैं तो स्ट्रक्चरल में तीन काइंड्स हैं. यू हैव अ रीजनल, you have a technological. मेनली हम इन दोनों की बात करते हैं. अच्छा, स्ट्रक्चरल क्या होती है? स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट जो हमने पढ़ाई है उस हिसाब से, okay, one second. Casual, you're saying casual occurs when people have left one short-term job and they're about to take the second short-term job. This could be something like a construction job कि आपको पता है ये construction एक short term नौकरी है. ये project खत्म हो जाएगा, आप unemployed हो जाओगे, फिर आप दूसरी उस पे चले जाओगे, दूसरा short term project के ऊपर चले जाओगे. So continuously उसके बीच का जो time duration होता है, that's called casual unemployment. Okay. So, structural, usually the way we define structural unemployment is when there are certain changes occurring in uh, the structure of the economy. When you have some industrial changes that is taking place, something like primary to secondary, secondary to tertiary. Maybe textile is suffering, so that industry is suffering, and IT is booming. तो ये इस किस्म का जो स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इसको कहलाया जाता है. इसमें स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के अलावा एक रीजनल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हो सकती है. उसका क्या मतलब है कि ऑब्वियसली एक सर्टेन एरिया के अंदर एक सर्टेन टाइप ऑफ फैक्ट्रीज होती थी. फॉर एग्जांपल, फैसलाबाद इज नोन फॉर द टेक्सटाइल. सो हो सकता है कि फैसलाबाद के अंदर इफ द जॉब्स आर फॉलोइंग बट बिकॉज टेक्सटाइल इज नॉट डूइंग सो वेल, so because that region was specifically textile oriented, तो वहां पे जो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हो रही है that would be called a regional unemployment. So job vacancy is happening in a certain particular area of a country. Then you have technological. Obviously this one has to do with कि कोई advanced technology आती है and it sort of like replaces a certain X number of people. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इट कुड बी फार्मलैंड के ऊपर ट्रैक्टर का आ जाना. ट्रैक्टर के आने की वजह से फार्मर्स का रिडंडेंट होना is a typical example of technological unemployment. Chat GPT, we know, is going to create a lot of people unemployed because of that technology coming in, right? So इस तरह से हमारा डिस्कशन हो सकता है. एक हम इसके अंदर इन विच बुक इट इज, लेट मी जस्ट सजेस्ट, सुजन ग्रैंड एंड बैम्फर्ड की एक बुक के अंदर they've even mentioned, I haven't done this with most of you, international unemployment, and this one is actually about when a country is losing competitive uh, competitiveness in certain goods. तो उसकी वजह से उन certain sectors के अंदर people losing job, right? Um, because then that country's demand will be falling as a result of that. Then okay, now this one is slightly more serious as comparatively because there's gonna be it's a medium term. I would say let's say it's on a spectrum. It would be a medium term in time frame, and it's gonna affect uh, more than few people, right? More than few people. It's gonna have an effect on. So this one is something relatively more serious than frictional. Frictional may government might not make a lot of steps to fix frictional. They might थोड़ा बहुत तो कर सकते हैं. सर्च अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट को कम करने की कोशिश करें बाय टेलिंग पीपल हाँ जी कहाँ पे कौन सी नौकरी अवेलेबल है, सीजन के अंदर लोगों को ऑल्टरनेटिव ऑप्शन प्रोवाइड करें वगैरह. But structurally is where they would start to get worried. But जो सबसे ज्यादा जो उनको डर लगता है वो cyclical है. Cyclical is also known as the demand deficient. Basically, in this one, the entire aggregate demand curve is falling down, sort of like very recessionary. It's not just going to affect one industry like textile, but it's going to have an effect on all industries. I think Pakistan is actually feeling a cyclical unemployment situation right now. According to the government, we have 14%. According to the Gallup survey, we have about 22%. So the point is, in this one, there is an entire fall in the aggregate demand for goods and services in the economy, and that results in overall fall in the demand for labor in all industries. And this one is a long term with many people getting affected. This is something the government needs to fix. If they don't, it can be a very problematic situation for them. ठीक हो गया. So ये तुम्हारे types हैं, and the discussion on which one is more serious. So your discussion is gonna be, your evaluation is gonna be on the basis of the time duration and the number of affectees of this. All right. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू एक तुमको और कहाँ से समझ आना चाहिए. एक ऑन द पीपीसी कर्व you should have an understanding. Remember, should be able to connect it to the PPC. Capital, consumer, unemployment. This might be 8% unemployment. This might be 3% unemployment, right? And on the curve is your full employment being on the potential, right? Oh yeah, one more thing. You know how when I was talking about full employment and 5% unemployment, this is where it comes in. I said there is always unemployment in the economy. So ये frictional जो है, that is sort of like one of those जो कहते हैं कि हाँ जी, there will always be people in short-term naukri who might be losing work and might be starting very soon. There will always be seasons relating, it can be tourism based, agriculture based, you know, weather related. And there will always be people looking for something better, and there will always be people not willing to work at a certain wage rate, right? So इस तरह की unemployment तो हमेशा exist करती है. So that sort of unemployment sort of does not allow inflation to go out of hand when there is an increase in demand, because they are willing and able to work without creating inflation. Okay, Ji. Then we talk about the consequence of unemployment. Please make sure that you read up on that. Consequences के अंदर, it could be about the person who's losing incomes and losing his minds and getting unskilled, de-skilled. Then he's, after long-term unemployment, a person might lose the skills that one might have. You know, it's sort of like a UFC fighter, maybe like not fighting for a year or two and then comes back, might lose his um, ability to fight, might not be as good as it was before, especially if that individual was not practicing, right? Domestic violence could be part of that. Drug of use, use of drugs, sorry. Um, Crime, that would be more of a social impact. Uh, Crime and vandalism. Uske alawa, you can even have effects like puri economy ka GDP will fall because people are unemployed. Government के ऊपर burden ज़्यादा हो सकता है. Government might need to spend money which they don't have, or might have other opportunity costs. Taxation के अंदर reduction, because less people working means less taxes, both income and the GST, the indirect taxes, right? Uh, फिर एक कॉन्सेप्ट है hysteresis का. I believe AS के अंदर it's an important concept, hysteresis का. So it's sort of like this. You know how when we said cyclical के अंदर अगर aggregate demand गिरेगा तो labor की demand में भी drop आएगा. तो फिर अगर गवर्नमेंट स्टेप्स लेती है और एडी को वापस से बढ़ाती है एक्सपेंशनरी फिजिकल एंड मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी से, तो क्या लेबर की डिमांड भी बढ़ जाएगी? तो वी सेड नॉट नेसेसरली. If AD increases again, It's quite possible that businesses might wait to see whether this increase in demand is permanent or is just a small short, uptick, and it might not last so long. So in those situations, the firms will not start hiring immediately. So there's a lag that takes place. Not only that, but sometimes people lose their skills. So it might not be so easy for them to get their jobs back when AD increases. And thirdly, um, it's quite possible that the firms decide to go the other way, meaning that if the demand is rising, they would choose to replace those workers wherever possible with machines like capital and stuff, right? So they would replace them with the machineries because they're more reliable in a way. ठीक हो गया. So unemployment, how significant it is, बहुत ज़्यादा time तक unemployment हो जाए तो that is something to worry about, not just because of the country losing the skill, but people moving abroad, and mostly it is the productive people who leave the country. You want to keep those people. Like, for example, I'll give you an example right now. Right now in Pakistan, one of the biggest worries for the government should be, but it's not, but it is for economists. It's a worry is that because the economy is shrinking so fast and industries are temporarily shutting off, right? Indus Motors, Honda Atlas, every now and then 2 हफ्ते 3 हफ्ते के लिए factories बंद कर रहे हैं. The problem would be if they decide to permanently close it. When you temporarily close a business, it's much more easier to restart them than if it's shut down completely. That's a bad situation. So if the business community is not uh, taken into confidence that we're trying to fix things and things are gonna get better very soon, then these businesses might decide that we want to shut it down, we want to close it. And if they do, then that's bye bye to those industries. Those industries are not coming back. Okay. The temporary band hona is not bad, but एक अच्छा सा बंद हो जाना, permanent बंद हो जाना, because then the workers, like for example, if Pakistani textile is not doing well and a lot of companies shut down, there's a lot of people who are going to be unemployed because of that, and who were very productive all their lives. They've done this and they were highly productive. Now these people will have to uh, retrain and start doing something else all over from the start, and that's not going to earn them a lot of money, and they're not going to be very productive, at least in their early years. Now if you start growing your textile again after a few years, you're going to have tough time finding good textile workers, and that you might lose comparative advantage, because remember, when we're going to do absolute and comparative advantage in international trade, you got to remember that it is not so easy uh, to find comparative advantage too quickly. इनफैक्ट अगर आप पहली दफा भी किसी इंडस्ट्री में जाते हो तो कंपैरेटिव एडवांटेज डिस्कवर करने में और ग्रूम करने में इट टेक्स टाइम, राइट? तो फिर आपको वो प्रॉब्लम देगा. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट जब होती है, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हर किसी को इक्वली अफेक्ट नहीं करती है, डिफरेंट लोगों को डिफरेंटली अफेक्ट करती है. It's usually the people close to retirement who gets unemployed first, and people who just entered the workforce. Experienced middle age ज़्यादातर रखा जाता है बंदा, but then eventually they're also let out. There might be gender related, uh, racial reasons in certain ways. Obviously, it's not promoted, but I wouldn't be naive enough to say okay, it does not exist. It exists, right? Uh, So yeah, I think this is what there is in your unemployment chapter. You should be able to talk about that. अच्छा एक और चीज जो इस अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के अंदर व्हेन वी वर राइटिंग द फॉर्मूलाज फॉर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट देयर आर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट मेजर करने के दो तरीके you can look into the notes. I'll just quickly go over it. One was the claimant count, right? And one was the ILO's uh, labor force survey, right? So these are two basically ideas के जिसकी basis के ऊपर आप unemployment को measure करते हो. The first one is simply claimant count. All those people who are asking the government for unemployment benefits, they're claiming unemployment benefits are considered unemployed. Simple as that. Government will have the data. कितने लोग registered हैं, कितने काम कर रहे हैं उसमें से और कितने लोग unemployment benefit claim कर रहे हैं. So simple formula लगाओ and you know how much unemployment there is. But we know there's a problem with this. There's a problem which has to do with maybe people might illegally claim the benefit and are working for cash because one reported हो जाती है. It is quite possible that people might not be claiming unemployment benefits. Why? Maybe because of the status or the ego, or they just don't want to get that feeling. Or maybe they're confident enough कि उनको नौकरी मिल जाएगी. They have decent savings and family incomes coming in that they don't have to worry about being unemployed. तो वो भी ठीक है, वो भी हो सकता है. Uh, but the worst is that all countries, you can't use this in Pakistan or a lot of developing countries because we don't have unemployment benefit का system. तो फिर अब आप आ जाते हो लेबर फोर्स सर्वे के ऊपर. लेबर फोर्स सर्वे क्या होता है? ये बेसिकली एक आप एक सर्वे करते हो विद अ सैंपल पॉपुलेशन और उनसे एवरी नाउ एंड देन आप पूछते हैं कि हाँ जी बताएं, आप एम्प्लॉयड हैं कि नहीं एम्प्लॉयड हैं, आपकी वर्किंग कंडीशंस क्या है, आपकी सैलरी सिचुएशंस क्या है, आपकी वर्किंग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स अच्छे हैं कि नहीं है. So stuff like that, so you do a survey of X number of people, and based on that survey, then you put the projection out onto the whole economy कि जी ठीक है 22% अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट है. ये ये जो गैलो सर्वे है उसके अंदर भी प्रॉब्ली ऐसे ही हुआ होगा कि 2-4 हज़ार लोगों आपने रैंडमली उठाए होंगे सोसाइटी में से जो आपकी पॉपुलेशन को रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं और उनसे आपने पूछ लिया हाँ जी कितने 100 में से कितने लोगों को आप जानते हैं कि अनएम्प्लॉयड हैं और इस तरह से सैंपल कर सकते हैं. इट इज़ वेरी टाइम कंज्यूमिंग, वेरी एक्सपेंसिव ऑब्वियसली, बट द गुड थिंग इज इट इज़ एन इंटरनेशनल लेबर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का तरीका. So their criterias are fixed country to country. So internationally, you can actually use it to make a comparison कि ठीक है जी इंडिया के अंदर एक ड्राइवर को कितने पैसे मिलते हैं, पाकिस्तान में एक ड्राइवर को कितने पैसे मिलते हैं वगैरह. तो ये comparison reasonable बनता है. So you can take a look at this claimant count and ILO का discussion. All right. Okay, let me take a look at some of essays on this. क्या essays आए हुए होंगे इसके ऊपर? Let me see. All right. This one's a complicated and nice question. Let me take it out separately. Discuss the question है. बहुत सारे marks का. Discuss whether a country with an unemployment rate of 3% has a better macroeconomic performance than one with an employment rate of 8%. Now, what I'm interested in over here is macroeconomic performance. What do we mean by that macroeconomic performance? So for that, before we go into anything, you need to have a clear picture of what are these macroeconomic performance. तो उसके लिए हमें जाना पड़ेगा मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंडिकेटर्स के ऊपर. मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक indicators are about whether we have sustainable economic growth. All right. Whether we have price stability, whether we have favorable balance of payment and stable foreign exchange, or whether we have equitable distribution of income. ये तुम्हारे कुछ macroeconomic objectives हैं as listed, and obviously having a low unemployment is also one of those you know macroeconomic aims. But the discussion, what is the discussion over here? 3% is better, 8% is better. I want to argue on both sides before giving my evaluation on this one. Now, what is good thing about 3%? Well, the good thing about 3% is a lot of people are working. A lot of people are making income. A lot of people are spending. I would suspect economic growth rate would be good. I would say price might be rising, right? It may be inflationary. I'm not sure of it, but it might be inflationary at 3% because incomes are high, spending is high, living standards are improving. People might be exporting and importing foreign goods and all. So that might be a little tricky on the balance of payments. But they're not going to be mentally stressed out probably because they're working, not much of a domestic side issue. The needs are being fulfilled in the economy. You know, good thing is government might not have to give a lot of unemployment benefits. The government might be getting a lot of taxes. So I'm sort of like thinking the advantages of low unemployment, right? On the other hand, the disadvantage of unemployment I want to talk about, that how if 8% would mean that out of every 10 people, out of every 100 people, 8 people are unemployed. So that's loss of income for that household. There's loss of expenditure, there's loss of GDP, there's a possibility of crime and vandalism and sociological factors. Uh, you know, but the good thing is wages probably might be on the lower side, and that might make businesses very happy, and cost of production low internationally, maybe make us competitive, right? So many things that we can talk about. 8% can be good also. So what I'm thinking here is for my evaluation is it depends. It depends that if the country is going through massive inflation and unsustainable economic growth, right? This is like full employment के ऊपर heavy AD increasing. So in that situation, maybe one might prefer a higher unemployment rate so that the things can calm down a little, the inflation can be controlled. Because remember one thing, to quite a degree, price and unemployment actually works in opposite ways. If you try to reduce unemployment, if you try to reduce unemployment, it might create inflation because more people, more demand, more prices. But if you try to control inflation, chances are unemployment is going to rise. Okay, because inflation को control करने के लिए खासतौर पे if you're using the demand side policies, uh, that might be a problem. Okay, you can talk in terms of short run versus long run. 8% unemployment है, लेकिन अगर ये short run unemployment है for something not so major reasons, so then it would not be considered a much of a problem. But if it's like a long run situation, then it might be problematic. तो थोड़ा सा उस एंगल के ऊपर ये डिस्कशन होना है इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर यू हैव टू टॉक अबाउट द गुड्स एंड द बैड ऑफ बोथ low unemployment and high unemployment. You have to talk about both goods and bad, right? और फिर तुम short run, long run के साथ इसका discussion further कर सकते हो. Let me quickly go over one more question. I don't know what's going on. Screen. Second. एक आध because इस chapter में कुछ खास questions और बनते हैं नहीं. Uh, so this was the complicated one to give. I think that if you can answer this one, then you have a very good understanding of this whole thing. The easier questions would be something like this. Just a 4A and 4B here. Let me take it out on the side. Let's have a discussion. Yeah. 4A says explain the meaning of unemployment and compare the ways of measuring it. ठीक है? So this one is unemployment को define करो उसको उसका formula दो मुझे उसके बाद compare the ways of measuring it. This is about the claimant count. Claimant count जब बताओगे तो उसका advantages disadvantages दोनों बताओगे और like I just discussed and the labor force survey उसका advantages and disadvantages. It's there in your notes. Very simple, straightforward बच्चों वाला है. ठीक है. Types discuss whether the consequences of cyclical unemployment results in greater problem for economy than those of structural unemployment. I would say, just briefly do suggest KG cyclical occurs when an aggregate demand is falling and all sectors, all industries in the economy is suffering. Versus structural is when you have a regional or technological वगैरह वगैरह. Discuss whether the consequences of cyclical. Cyclical is long term and it affects a lot of people. Certain industries shifting. हमने पहले भी कहा था कि देखो स्ट्रक्चरल क्या होती है जब आपकी सर्टेन आप इंडस्ट्री प्राइमरी टू सेकेंडरी जा रहे होते हो या फिर आप टेक्सटाइल टू आईटी जा रहे होते हो. There are goods to it and there are bads to it, right? Uh, short term के अंदर there might be trouble structural के situation में जब industry wise आप switch कर रहे हैं, but in the long term it might be a good thing because IT would be more income generational. It might get you more better competitive advantage. Maybe you have more people getting educated now. So that is the way forward as compared to maybe textile, and that might be dying up because your cotton production has been going down, or maybe the global demand for it is going down, or maybe there are too many international competitors, so it's just not you're just not good enough uh, against them. Cyclical, I would still say that cyclical is much more of a problem. लेकिन देखो दोनों solve हो सकती हैं. Cyclical कैसे solve कर सकते हो? Cyclical is what? AD गिरा हुआ है. तो आप AD बढ़ा दो. Fiscal monetary policy की expansionary policies करके you might be able to increase it. Structural के अंदर you got to retrain people to be able to do newer jobs. That might seem like a challenge. Who's going to do that, right? The government might have to, in a complicated process, set up different, training centers and things like that. And how can you manage all those all over the country? And what is the future demand for which industry? That might be a little more complicated. So that's how you're going to be arguing. But for your evaluation purposes, greater problems for the economy, that's your key word over here. Which one's going to result in greater problems for the economy? Whatever you would want to argue, I would still argue cyclical creates greater problems for the economy because it creates an overall unemployment all across your country, and that is something really difficult to deal with, right? So that's your unemployment का chapter uh, in a full glance. एक simple सा question ये भी आ सकता है कि which I've already discussed the types of unemployment and consider which one's the more serious one. ठीक? So I'll stop here for the day.